Hello everyone, I'm Amy. Today we are doing the Books and Life tag. I saw Hillary from Melted Books doing this tag. She saw my other friend Victoria from What Victoria Read do this tag, and it looks like the original creator was Steve Donahue. So, I'm going to be checking out the original video after filming this as well. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm really excited for this because it's like bookish questions, but it's way more life oriented. It's not so much like bookish taste oriented like a lot of book tags are. So, first question, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being a normal person, whatever that means, and 10 being the late Harold Bloom, how much are books and reading a part of your life? First off, give me a second to look up Harold Bloom because I've honestly never ever heard of this person. Judge me if you must. I don't know who Harold Bloom is. Apparently Harold Bloom was an American literary critic and Sterling Professor of Humanities at Yale University, according to Wikipedia. Sounds like a very smart guy. I would say, let's see, how much are books and reading a part of your life? They're a huge part. Clearly, like, I love reading. I have this channel dedicated to reading. I've always been a big reader. I love to talk about books in my everyday life. Hillary mentioned that she put herself at like an 8. I think she should be at probably an 8 or a 9, honestly, because she does mention that she's a librarian, so her books to her are even a bigger part of her life than with me. Like, I'm a designer and an artist, so I love books, but they're way more hobby oriented than like my actual life, because my life is filled with so many other things, like the 1,000,001 jobs that I have. I'm married, so I have that relationship. I have my 2 cats. I try to hang out with friends as much as possible. I love crafting. So reading is a huge part, but it's not the only thing I have going on. However, I would say it's a pretty big part of my personality. Like, if you don't like reading on any level, like, it can be kind of hard for me to know what to talk about sometimes in those situations. So I think I would put myself at a solid 5. Like, very important, not the only thing I have going on, but still a significant part of my life and my personality. Next question, where does your personal library stand right now in relation to the rest of your life? Do you have more books now than you ever have, or fewer, and how has your library changed? Where does your personal library stand right now in relation to the rest of your life? I mean, I have a whole room dedicated to my library now. Excuse the ring light that I have going on here. Maybe I should loosen this camera first. I'm not really used to using this stand. There we go. That's my ring light. I've got my bookshelf over there, if it would focus on that. I've got the bookshelf behind me. I've got, down here is my little TBR bookshelf, and I actually have a bookshelf in the basement. I'll try and remember to link, sorry about the moving camera. I'll try to put a link up in the corner here for a video I did, must have been a couple months ago, on books in my collection that you don't normally see because it's not placed in my library, but I have a whole, like, one of those rolling carts down in my craft room that's filled with my art books. I have a shelf in my office that's filled with like writing and technology books. I have another shelf that's filled with my human sexuality books and some adult coloring books that I have. So I've got a lot of books kind of placed around the house in other areas, but my library is like my dedicated, at least my dedicated fiction reading space, and probably 60% of my nonfiction collection. My collection is definitely much larger than it was growing up. Not that I didn't have a good collection growing up, like I did, but buying new books wasn't something that I necessarily got to do a lot. Like, I had my collection of Hank the Cowdog books and Twilight and Harry Potter, but I didn't often get to buy new books. Like, that was like a special occasion whenever we would go to the big city, which is, what, maybe 160,000 people. It's not a big city to others, but to me it's the big city life that I'm living right now. We would travel here from my hometown 2 hours away, and sometimes I would get to buy 1 or 2 new books if I was really, really good. But I've definitely expanded now that I have a more adult income. I want to say my collection has shrunk a little bit in the last year or so. Like I've tried to curb my spending slightly. I don't know how well that's worked, but I've done a couple of large unhauls recently, really facing like, these are books that I've tried and I just wasn't into, and I'm probably never actually going to get around to reading them, or like, here's some books that have been sitting around and I enjoyed them, but I'm just never going to actually reread them because there's other things I'd rather reread. So I don't know. I'm better at tailoring my collection now. Most of what I have is stuff that I either want to reread, haven't read yet, or want to use as like a reference for a paper, for a video, for a conversation. I might hold on to the books that I recommend a lot because they're important to me for those reasons. Question number 3. Take a mental step back and ask yourself, what is the most likely first bookish impression a newcomer would have in your home? Probably, wow, like, she's a nerd, she's got a passion, she knows what she likes. I love having new people to my house, like people who've never been to my house. I love to have them over, and I'm just like, you should come over and see my library, and they come over, and I'm like, okay, are you ready? And I open the door, and I'm like, here's the library, and everyone just looks around, they're like, wow, like, this is, I don't have big readers in my physical personal life. Most, if not all of, well, most of my big reader friends are from outside of my town, outside of my state. I know them online. I don't know most of them like personally, physically in person. They're still, of course, good friends of mine. I can think of 2 or 3 truly big reader friends that I have, in that they love reading, but they may not have as much time for it as I do. So yeah, people are usually just like, oh, this is what she talks about, this is what she's passionate about, cool. I don't really have anything to add to this conversation because I'm not a big reader myself, but good for you. I think that's kind of generally the reaction that I end up getting. Even outside of my home, I'll have like people at work just be like, wow, you talk about books a lot, you're such a nerd, but also it's kind of cool to watch you nerd out about this thing. Like, question number 4, how often do you clean and reorganize your books? Clean, almost never. I'd say every 6 months or so, I'll like wipe down the front bit of the shelf that's showing. So like you have where the books sit, and then you've got like 2 or 3 inches of shelf right here that I'll wipe off just to kind of keep up appearances. I've tried to take different textures of cloths, like microfiber or like a towel or something, and kind of sweep off the top on the pages. I've seen someone in a video who like vacuums the top of their books, but I haven't found a good technique for it. If you have something like my Barnes & Noble leather bounds that have like this gold, whatchamacallit, the sprayed edges, these are really shiny and have like a different texture to them than non-coated pages, so they're a little easier to clean than just the straight paper pages. But yeah, I haven't really found a solid technique that feels like it does the cleaning. If I do a big reorganization, that's when I really clean my shelves. Like if I'm taking books off of shelves and moving them around, then I'll just take everything off the shelves and really wipe down the shelf itself. But again, the books themselves don't really get that much cleaning. There's just not an easy way to wipe down paper, honestly. So yeah, I'd say reorganize or clean every 6 months to a year. I've done 2 big reorganizations in the last 6 months because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my shelves. At that point, I had a lot of books that I didn't really need or want anymore, or wasn't interested in anymore. And I had a friend help me do a rainbow shelf reorganization. I can put that video up in the corner. And that was fun, but I realized rainbow reorganization or rainbow shelves were not for me. I couldn't find anything. So reorganized again. I've got my vampire shelf now, which is what I really wanted. I've got my TBR shelf back, which is really important to me because even when I had rainbow organization, I had just kept moving all the books that I hadn't read yet because I want to be able to find them easily. So whenever I need a new book to read, I have like the spot to go to. And there is some rainbow organization. I'll loosen this up again. Over here with this is my little, the middle there is kind of a fiction contemporary shelf, and you can see it's kind of in color organization on the bottom of that middle shelf. So within a genre, I'll have it color organized. But really, I'm happy with not having the color organization. I like to have genres and authors and series all kind of together. Question number 5. On average, how many books do you acquire in a given week? I guess it depends on what you mean by acquire. My book buying has gone down. I will get, I'd say 1 to 2 books a month. And that's kind of on average. There are some months that I haven't bought any books, and there are some months that I bought 2 or 3 books. But I'd say to 1 to 2 books a month at this point. Library, I haven't been checking out as many books from the library, and a lot of the books that I have on hold are still going to be on hold for 2 weeks to 2 months, so that can kind of depend a little on the availability. Next one is not actually a bookish question. What song is your current earworm? While this isn't a bookish question, I can make it bookish. My current earworm has been Waste My Youth by Galzara, just saying like, hey, I love you a lot and I want to waste all of my younger days just hanging out with you, and if I can figure out how to put my TikTok thing up here, I will. But I made a little TikTok video with that song where I'm just singing passionately or lip syncing passionately to my bookshelves and my books and being like, I want to waste my youth on you, on reading. And yeah, that song has been my earworm off and on for a couple of months now. It's really catchy and it's passionate and it's fun, and I liked making that little TikTok on it. What percentage of your self-control do you retain in a well-stocked bookshop? Depends on my mood. I have found that I have a really unhealthy relationship with shopping. That's something I'm really trying to work on right now to kind of get my finances under better control. In general, I'd say I do okay in well-stocked bookshops, but I also don't feel that I've been to a lot of well-stocked bookshops. For example, Barnes & Noble, I love going in there and looking at all the collections, but I'll have my list of like, these are the books that I'm looking for. And 99% of the books on those lists I have to order and are not actually in store. So it's pretty easy for me to not really buy a bunch of books when I'm in Barnes & Noble. There's a really great local bookshop that I love to browse. Almost every book that I've bought there, I've ended up loving, whether or not it's on my list of like books that I'm really looking out for. I've been to a really big bookstore in Spokane. It was it Auntie's Bookshop? It's got like the new section on the bottom and the used section on the top, and I think it's got a gallery on the 3rd floor. And there was a lot of really awesome books there, but nothing that was kind of feeling like an immediate need to me. So I think I left that shop with 2 books. So yeah, I'd say I do okay, but I also haven't really come across bookshops that have even 10% of the books on my list. So I guess we'll have to see. If and when I find that bookshop, I might be in trouble. Do you ever feel the need to take a break from books? If so, what form does it take? Kind of. It's not so much usually that I want a break from books in general. It's a break from certain books. So my goal right now, I actually have this list in my planner of books that I'm currently reading, and I'll highlight whether I'm at like a quarter into it, halfway into it, to 3/4 of the way into it or whether I finished it. And I've got a lot of nonfiction books on that list that I just haven't finished yet. So for Nonfiction November, I actually want to try and focus on actually finishing some of those nonfiction books that have been on my reading list for a while, where like I got a quarter or halfway through it and then just stopped actively reading it, but I still want to finish it. So what was even the question again? Do I need to take a break from books? I need to take breaks from certain books. A lot of times with nonfiction, I'll really be loving it, but I kind of struggle to read nothing but that one nonfiction book during the week. I like breaking up with some fiction. So like I took a break from Fuzz by Mary Roach and I picked up Needful Things for October. And then I took a break from Needful Things and started reading some of Jane Eyre. And then I got back into reading a chapter or two of Fuzz, and now I'm back to reading Needful Things. Different days and different weeks, I'm in a different kind of book mood. I have been spending a lot more time watching TV lately, specifically horror movies, because I'm getting back in the horror movie mood. We just got through October. I'm getting better at kind of finding the horror movies that I'm going to enjoy that aren't going to be overwhelming for me. So I've done that more lately. I've also picked up my hours at work, so by the time I get home, I'm like, I really don't want to concentrate on reading right now. So it's not so much a break from books in general as a break from whatever book I'm reading to change up the tone a little bit. So next question, when you meet a new person, how long does it take you to bring up books? Let's see. When I first started working at Ulta, I'm pretty sure I brought up reading as a hobby during my interview, and I'm pretty sure that I mentioned my love of reading to every single one of my coworkers within the first week. And actually, whenever I first got Fuzz by Mary Roach, which I just mentioned, I was reading the introduction, and it was so funny to me because it was about taking caterpillars to court, and it's a true story. And I just opened up the book in the back room, and there was like 2 or 3 people back there, and I'm like, I would like to do a reading for you, and I read aloud from those first 2 paragraphs. I was reading Needful Things. I'm still reading Needful Things, but I was in the back room reading it, and one of my coworkers who really loves horror movies was just like, oh, hey, that's Stephen King. Like, what are you reading? Tell me about it. And she's just like nodding and listening to me talking about it, and she's like, yeah, I'm never gonna read it. I'm not a book reader, but like, cool. Glad you're enjoying it. She's a funny one. She told me recently that she loves our conversations because we can never understand each other. So I'll be talking about books and how much I love them because she decided to be a nice person and ask me about the book that I'm reading. And she's just like, yeah, I don't get what you're talking about. You're too smart for me. And I'm like, oh, whatever. But then she'll start talking about the horror movies that she really loves. And I'm just like, that is not to my taste and I'm not going to watch those, but good for you. So books come up in almost every conversation that I have, or like someone will mention some life experience or something that happened to them that day, and it'll be like, oh, that reminds me of this author, or that reminds me of this book. I have another coworker of mine, a good friend of mine actually, who wanted, for the week before Halloween for work, she was doing eye makeup that was inspired by movie monsters, and one day she did The Creature from the Black Lagoon, and I'm like, oh, if you really love The Creature from the Black Lagoon, I really think that you would love Lady from the Black Lagoon. And she seemed really interested. I gave her like information on where to buy it and how much she could get it for, and I told her about the author, and I told her about Mallory O'Meara's new book that she wrote, which was The History of Women and Alcohol, and she's like, oh, that sounds really interesting. And she's like, I do like certain nonfiction, but in general I feel really picky. And I'm like, well, here's the kind of books that I usually read and the kind of books that I don't usually read, and judging from what you've told me, here's some books that I think you would really like. So you can't really get through a conversation with me without me bringing up a book eventually. What are we on? Question number 10. Have you given any thought or made any provisions for your personal library after you croak? I haven't made any provisions for it. I have put some thought into it. I think there are certain books that I would pass on to certain people, But in general, I've been volunteering at my local Friends of the Library since 2017, and most, if not all, of my books, when I croak, I'm gonna donate. There's gonna be a reader like me somewhere in my town, I'm sure, that I haven't met yet, who's gonna look at some of the books in my collection and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I have the opportunity to buy these for $1, for $2, and expand my collection. Because right now, like, yeah, I'm trying to work on my finances, but I still had the means to upkeep a really good library, and not everyone has that privilege. And I want to be able to pass these on to people who don't have my privilege and who are looking for a good deal on a book and who want to expand their collection but don't always have the money to do that, you know? Are you known among your friends and loved ones for your weird and probably unhealthy relationship with books? As we've probably established from the previous questions, yes, I am. I'm known very well for my nerdiness and my relationship with books. It's kind of a running joke among some of my friends, I think. But that is the books and life tag. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Hopefully I can edit this down to like under 20 minutes because I got pretty chatty in this one. But this was fun. Like, it's not so much about book tastes as how books are integrated into your life. So I had a good time with this one. That is going to be it from me. So please like, subscribe, be my friend on social media. I will hopefully see all of you in my next video. Bye, friends.